Deep in the Bavarian forest, where spruce thickens and the tracks of boar score the snow like runic slashes, a small convent stood back from the road at the end of a rutted lane. Most maps did not name it, and the wooden sign at the junction had long since tilted until its letters were read at a slant. St. Walburga Hermitage. 5 women lived there. The villagers in Zwiesel said the sisters kept bees and a kitchen garden, sang at lauds and vespers, and bought tea and flour twice a month from the shop near the church. In winter the bell carried farther than voices. On clear nights you could hear it from the hill above Frauenau, a soft iron heartbeat in the trees. That January the bell did not ring. The Mother Superior was Sister Agatha, 60, square-shouldered, with hands like tools and eyes that took the measure of everything they touched. The cross she wore, heavy wood, not pretty, hung low. When she stooped to lift a crate or draw water from the well, it thunked against bone. Sister Maria, 40, was the quiet one, keeper of the convent's letters and accounts. She wrote everything down: weather, visitors, bees, repairs, psalms set for the week. She had filled 15 thick journals in a careful, small hand, and kept a green enameled mug of tea on her desk that stained paper with circles when she forgot a coaster. Sister Clara, 35, steered the garden through frost and drought. She wore a pouch of dried plants, yarrow, sage, St. John's wort, at her waist, tied with twine, the kind of medicine that works as much by scent as by tincture. Sister Isabella, 28, was still a novice, painter of icons by lamplight, her fingertips often freckled with ochre and lapis. And Sister Teresa, 24, the youngest, sang when she worked, psalms bright as keys turning. On her wrist, she wore a slender silver bracelet, a gift from her brother when she took the veil. She spun it while she thought. Snow came early and stayed. For a week the postman came up the lane, knocked with his glove at the gate, called out "Grüß Gott" through the wood. No answer. He left parcels on the sheltered ledge and walked back listening to the squeak of his own steps. On the 4th day, he tried the side door used by deliveries. The iron latch on the outer gate was cold and rough. Beyond it the yard was unmarked. No broom had swept the path. He listened to the house. No fire in the kitchen, no bees shifting in the shed, no kettle hiss. He walked back thinking of a loose hinge, an illness, a retreat nobody told him about. Down in the village, people said they had seen lights in the trees on 2 different nights, lanterns or foxfire. One boy swore he heard singing that wasn't wind, a thin thread that snagged on branches and then was gone. On the 9th morning, 3 hunters came down from the ridge with their sledge bare and their hands raw, the forest so still the snow squeaked under boots like chalk. They stopped where the lane met the road, looking up at the convent wall, at the small cupola with its bell dark against a paler sky. One said, "Do you smell that? Not rot, not smoke. A tallowy tang of old wax and wet stone." They hoisted themselves over the gate one by one and crossed the yard, their steps the first marks on the white. The main door was barred. The kitchen door yielded after a shove. Hinges cried like something alive. Inside, a loaf lay cut on the board, the knife at right angles as if set down to answer a call and not taken again. A pot with a skin of fat sat cold on the stove. A kettle never emptied had rimmed the counter with a brown ring. In the refectory, 5 bowls stood in a row, rinsed, turned mouth down to dry. In the dormitory corridor, each wooden cell door had its key turned from inside. The hunters knocked again, said Schwester, and heard their own breath. They found a chair laid gently on its side, a shawl folded, a thin book with a pressed sprig of rosemary inside. The chapel door was shut. One hunter, the eldest, said no, and the others nodded, and they went back into the snow and ran for Zwiesel as if something in the lane followed. Police came from Regen and Deggendorf, and a young priest from the parish. Their cars nosed into drifts at the bottom of the lane and stayed there, lights ticking, radios hiss crackling. The officers' boots stamped out a new path through the gate, and the priest's black shoes soaked and stiffened. They stepped through the kitchen with its cold tea cushion in the cup, through the laundry room where a blue apron had frozen stiff where it hung, through the corridor where every door clung shut with a turned key. "Mark it," said the senior officer, and a younger one wrote, "Cell 1, barred from inside. Cell 2, same. 3, same." The dog team came up last. The animals dug to the well and whined there, pawing at the stones, their bodies shivering with cold or with something else. The sergeant peered down the shaft and saw only water like a black button and his own light circling it. They forced the chapel door. The nave was a skin of cold. Tapers on the side altar had burned to nubs and died. The wax had slumped into white kelp. On the flagstones lay 5 bodies head to head like spokes in a wheel, feet pointing out toward the pews. Sister Agatha faced the altar. The cross rope that had held her heavy wood crucifix had split and lay across her collarbone like a lash. Sister Maria's hands were folded over the book she always carried, a smaller journal, its leather softened by palm and breath, the big ledger. the thick diary of the house, rested on the front pew with a pencil across it. Sister Clara's herb pouch had burst. Little islands of color lay around her head like a garden under ice. Sister Isabella's brushes were scattered along one edge of stone. One had snapped. A hairline of red-brown bristle caught against a crack, as if painting had bitten the floor. Beside Sister Teresa's right hand. So young she looked asleep if you didn't look at the skin tone. Slivers of silver glinted. The bracelet had torn. 3 links had sprung and curled like fishhooks. There were marks. Not clean rope burns. Not a single clear ligature line. Bruises in dumb shapes. A band above the larynx. Dark thumb ovals beneath ear and jaw. The doctor from Zwiesel, called from his surgery, knelt without taking off his hat, and said very softly, "Neen." The priest's breath smoked 2 little clouds. He whispered a psalm, and no one stopped him. The oldest hunter, such old stories the villages keep, crossed himself twice, as if a single line would not be sure. They sealed the house and brought lights. The scene technician, 50-ish, tidy, a man whose hands fidgeted if he had no pin or small screw to roll, set up tripods and wrote numbers on little tents. The young officer wrote on his board, Protocol NR 1, January 12th. Entry 1117. Personnel present. Huber, Seidel, Brenner. Parish priest Muller. He noted the weather, -7, flurries, and the smell, wax, cold iron, a trace of herbs, and asked himself afterward why he had written the smell down, why that had seemed as factual as a footprint. It would be one of the 5 things from that day he would not be able to forget. They did the work. Photographs, bagging, a net lowered into the well with a camera rig, the bucket wet and clean, the rope older than any of them. They found no prime marks on any hinge, no gravel pushed back from a wall where a secret door might have jostled. They found an old mouse run through the pantry, a crosshatch of tiny feet and spilled flour that ended in a crack. They found a bar of soap with fingernail commas cut from it, as if someone had worried it while waiting. They found a cup warmed by no hand for days, a green enamel mug, ringed dark on the bottom, the handle mended with wire. Sister Maria's. In a cell they found a photograph thumbtacked to a wooden wall. For women in the garden years earlier, all younger, one laughing off to the side while the others tried to be serious. Whoever had owned it had drawn a pencil halo of clover around the smallest face. They read the big diary first. After the list of eggs and the price of lamp oil, and a note about roof tiles rattled loose in a wind, there was this from Sister Maria, dated 4 nights before the discovery. 2 a.m. A creak in the east corridor. I thought it was Clara to the privy. I opened my door and saw no candle. Heard tread that was not the weight of any of us. We prayed Compline anew. The next night, again the step. The latch lifted once, not enough to open my door. Agatha says mice. It is not mice. I have heard men's steps in the world. They make a different sound in wood. He goes from door to door and then away. The next. If we keep vigil, he does not come. If we sleep, the foot goes soft outside our rooms. Teresa chafes her hands purple with fear. Isabella left the icon of St. Michael by my bed. I wrote all this to measure it. If it is measured, it cannot be only fear. God see me forgiven. And the last, written crabbed, the script pitched too high. The morning of the day someone would write Protocol NR 1. At night someone walks between our cells. We pray, but he comes closer. They took the book wrapped in paper like a loaf. Clara's little pouch they poured into an envelope, each leaf recorded. Teresa's bracelet links they teased up with a brush and a card. Agatha's cross they lifted from her. The cord had snapped as if cut, but the wood held no nick. The paintbrush that had snapped they photographed from 4 angles. Where it lay, a fingernail scuff had scrawled the bristle end briefly across stone, a whisper of red-brown that was not blood. The papers, local, then Munich, then Berlin, did what papers do. 5 nuns dead in locked convent, said Die Morgenpost. The circle in the chapel, said a Munich magazine, and drew a diagram colored like a board game. The Bavarian broadcaster ran a clip of the gate in snow and a villager who would not show his face saying he had heard singing. Tourists came as far as the lane and posed, then stamped their feet and drove back to warmer myths. The diocese gave a statement measured as bread. We mourn 5 daughters of the church. We ask for patience. We trust in the authorities. The bishop came and stood in the lane with his hat in his hands and did not go inside. On Sunday in Zwiesel, the priest adjusted his homily unwisely to include the words evil and door, and 3 old women did not return the next week because they did not like fear in their mouths. Forensics took the bodies to Deggendorf and did not rush. There were no defensive wounds under fingernails. There were bruises on arms where someone, or a rope, had constrained. On each throat, a banding not neat enough for a single cord and not ragged enough for fingers. The hyoid bones were unbroken. The cause of death red like winter. Hypoxia, no air, a thing stop that should have continued without instruction. The times of death varied within hours. There was no sign of drugging. One stomach held tea, Another, bread. One carried a single herb, yarrow, enough to scent but not to change anything. The youngest's wrist, Teresa's, showed a raw circle under where the bracelet had been, red as if its removal had surprised the skin. The police sat with maps and the diary. They modeled a circle on paper and on screen. They walked the corridors until their boots polished the boards. They timed how long it took to go from the far cell to the chapel, and how long it took to lay 5 bodies in a ring if you were one person alone and strong, or 2 people of middling strength. They considered ropes and found none, weights and found none, climbing marks and found none, windows wetted by wind to a thickness no hand could pry. They brought in a man who understood old buildings and asked him to listen to walls. He closed his eyes in the east corridor and smiled. "There is air moving somewhere it should not move," he said. He found a void where the chapel wall met the sacristy. Not a passage, just hunger in the stone. The villagers laid versions on the table like cards. 1. A stranger from the border walked in winter, found the convent, wanted food or money or rage, and the sisters, who had kept their gate locked, opened it to him because that is what you do with a knock in the name of God. 2. A man from a village nearer than Zwiesel, known to them and trusted, came up the lane smiling and left without the smile. 3. No man came. The wind moves. Fear walks. Prayer tightens around the throat when a heart runs too fast, and 5 women died of the same human tenderness to terror. 4. Old stories wake when named, wolves in clothing, saints with swords, devils too dull for hooves, and this was one of those. A week later, a boy from Frauenau found a length of old hemp rope frozen into the margin of a stream below the convent. The oldest hunter said all rope looks alike in snow. The police bagged it and found nothing on it but water and time. A day after that, a volunteer from Regan on her hands and knees in the sacristy found a sliver of wax pressed flat against the baseboard, as if a taper had been set there out of sight. They bagged that, too. Even its smoke could not be tested, and the sample went into a zip bag for completeness. The case number grew, and the case did not move. Sister Maria's journals went back years. Someone read them all. Summer entries felt like weather. Bees swarmed. Clara saved the queen. Autumn was lists and a line or 2 of gratitude. Advent stretched longer in ink. There were 2 entries that lit the margins. One from 3 winters earlier. A man from the road knocked at Compline. He asked for food. We fed him. He told a story about a wife in the Czech lands and cried into his tea. When he left, the clatter on the gate sounded like a promise did not hold. And one from the summer past. Teresa sings while she weeds. We keep the gate locked when we nap. Sister Agatha says the forest loves us, but it is not our friend. The police captain underlined that last line and felt foolish and underlined it again. He dreamed, that night, of walking an unlit corridor with a key in his palm and a door that moved closer when he blinked. Clara's pouch, when sorted, yielded the birch bark she had used for kindling, dried rosemary for the kitchen, a ribbon of St. John's wort petals for tea, and 2 roots she had not labeled that turned out to be angelica, ground, and something bitter. None had been steeped recently. There were no wet tea leaves in any sink. On the low table by Maria's desk, they found a letter she had not posted, addressed to a sister house near Passau, asking whether the old practice of keeping a night watch could be adopted. We are 5 only and nights are long. When they opened her green mug to bag it, the technician wrote, without thinking, smell of lemon. He had not smelled lemon in a month, and the word surprised him. Perhaps the mug had known lemon once, and his hands, cold, imagined the warmth of it. Sister Isabella's icons, unfinished Christ pandecrators and small saints for village kitchens, bore fingerprints at the corners in a brown as thin as tea where she had steadied them. On one she had written, at the back in pencil, for the boy with the red scarf, and no one in Zwiesel knew who that was. In her cell, under her pillow, the young officer found a scrap from a newspaper cut neatly along the edges, a photograph of a church in winter, a beam of light from a door like a vertical sword. On the other side, a recipe for biscuits in a hand different from Maria's. Someone in the village had given it, a habit shared across walls of stone and houses of wood. Sister Teresa's few belongings fit into a shoe box, the broken bracelet in its envelope, a small paperback book of hours with a violet pressed near Lodz, a postcard from her brother in Regensburg showing rowers on green water. Proud of you. You sound happy. I will visit after Epiphany. In the refectory, the youngest officer, new to this, stood in the door and listened because he wanted to hear something, anything. The air in the room had the stillness of places that have been careful for a long time. He could not hold it all in his pockets, and so he wrote on his own pad, a thing he should not have done. I don't want anyone unkind to write the ending for them. The coroner's report did not end anything. Cause of death consistent with asphyxia. Ligature pattern inconsistent. No single cord identified. Hyoid intact in all cases. No intoxicants detected. Post-mortem intervals within the range of 4 to 6 days. The prosecutor read it twice and said, "So, murder by rope we cannot find by a hand we cannot name that came through a door we cannot open." He closed the folder and stared at the window and wished for something ordinary. Rumors traveled the road faster than the police cars did. A radio show in Munich asked a priest and a psychologist to be tidy together in a 15-minute slot. They ran out of time before they ran out of language. A blogger who photographed abandoned places posted a map with an arrow and "Do not trespass" written in a font designed to invite the opposite. The diocese put the convent gate under a blue tarp and a lock. The hunters, quarried for quotes, said only that the snow had begun to move again where the police had pressed it flat. In Zwiesel, the baker sold out of honey cakes for a week, as if sweetness would tilt the world. When the funeral came, there were 5 coffins and more people in the church than could stand without pressing attention to attention. The bishop took a breath and said 5 names with a gentleness that made the men in uniform at the back look at their boots. The coffins traveled up the hill to a small plot beside a hedge. On each, someone placed a thing. Over Agatha, the cross she had worn, now mended and knotted. Over Maria, her green mug wrapped in cloth so it would not chip. Over Clara, her herbs in a packet tied plain. Over Isabella, a paintbrush newly bought. Over Teresa, a bracelet with a new clasp, bright and unapologetic. The snow kept its counsel. The convent stood with its gate locked, its bell hanging above a room that had not heard song in weeks. The police left 2 men to watch the lane on a rota. Men who would later say they heard footsteps where there were none and decided not to write it down. In March, when the thaw came raggedly, a maintenance crew drained and scrubbed the well. They found at the bottom a coin from 1976, a beetle-gone glass brittle, the rope's end, swollen and slumped like a limp snake, and the hilt of a small knife with no blade. The reports accepted all of this and moved the question nowhere. Years make order out of memory. The case file acquired a dust jacket and a place in a drawer. The diocese sold the land and kept the chapel, which stood alone among pines like a tooth kept after a jaw is gone. A sign was mounted on a stone at the lane, in memory of the sisters Agatha, Maria, Clara, Isabella, and Teresa of St. Walburga, who served in prayer and died in winter. Pray for us. People left things there the way people do: a folded page from a psalter, a small bottle of honey, a scarf, a postcard with a lake. Sometimes a tea bag, as if the idea of warmth understands itself through a single leaf in a paper sleeve. There were, because there must be, 3 best theories that people spoke under their breath. First, someone the sisters trusted came in, because he had touched the gate before and said a name that turned keys. He moved quietly, he knew their rooms, he had time, and he was stronger than they were. He used a rope in his hands, and he left through the kitchen door, and the snow fell after him and erased him like a blackboard erases chalk. Second, fear can be as strong as rope, and breath can fail for reasons a scalpel cannot instruct you about. And 5 women can die of the same undramatic thing if their hearts are tender and the night is long enough and the sound under a door is not named. Third, there is sometimes a 4th presence in a room that does not sign a form or leave a print. Old stones keep old stories, and those stories keep their own order when ours does not suffice. The young officer who had written the wrong note in his pocket went back in spring on his own time and stood in the refectory. He did not touch anything. He looked at the circle his own life made around him and thought about lists, doors, keys, names, lamps. He thought of the way Maria had written "We pray," but he comes closer, and of the way that line had run out of space at the end as if chased. He stood in the chapel doorway and did not cross the threshold out of respect. He imagined the circle and refused to place accusation inside it, because no one had earned it and everyone had. Later, when he had been promoted and had a team of younger officers who rolled pins the way the scene technician once had, he told them this: there are endings that are true and endings that are tidy. If you must choose, choose true. He did not mention the smell of lemon in winter. He kept that for himself like a small bead in a pocket to thumb when he needed the shape of something that had resisted becoming ordinary. On some evenings in the forest, when wind runs through spruce like water through reeds, hunters say the air near St. Walburga's tastes faintly of wax. If you stand under the bell and hold your breath, you may think you hear a voice, then 2, then 3, weaving a thin braid of song. It sounds less like fear than like obedience to a rhythm not ours. A green enamel circle on the memorial stone gathers rain. When the sun hits it, briefly, it shines as if something had just been warmed and set down. And if you watch long enough, a moth will come to the chapel door and tap the wood twice with its powder-soft wing. And that noise will be smaller than thought and larger than explanation, the way a mystery should be when it has already told you everything it intends to.